to Manufacturing Tomorrow's Workforce. I'm your host, Amanda Del Buno, here to introduce this pod's interview. Today we have LaFave Grace back again interviewing Anthony Nighswander, President of APT Manufacturing Solutions. In this interview, Christine and Anthony discuss APT's training program for area high school students. Stay tuned to learn how he got the program started and the benefits that it's brought its company. With no further ado, here's the interview.
Sometimes, if you want something done, if you want to see change happen, you've got to do it, or at least start on it, yourself. That's the position that Anthony Nighswander, president of APT Manufacturing Solutions in Hicksville, Ohio, found himself in a few years ago. Like a lot of leaders of small to mid-sized manufacturing companies across the country, Anthony was frustrated. Business was good, but he was struggling to find local workers with the skills his company needed. APT specializes in designing and building automation systems to help other manufacturers run their production lines and warehouses more efficiently. But Anthony couldn't find the humans he needed to help build the robots. The young people coming out of area high schools and colleges didn't have the engineering and machining proficiencies that APT depends upon. So Anthony decided that APT would take the lead in building the talent pipeline that it needed. In 2015, APT opened a 75,000 square foot training center inside its manufacturing facility, designed specifically for training high school students on manufacturing and engineering basics and robotic programming. Students who participate in APT's program attend high school in the morning and head over to APT in the afternoon. There, they learn how to build a robotic packaging cell for a hypothetical APT customer. At the end of the program, top-performing students are offered an apprenticeship with APT, while the company pays for them to take classes at Northwest State Community College. It's a multi-pronged effort that took a lot of effort and a lot of partnering, but Anthony says he's seeing it pay off. Anthony, thanks very much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, to start off, I was hoping you could take me through this program's development in a little more detail. It seems like more and more manufacturing company leaders across the country are reaching that point of deciding that they need to engage in workforce development differently. So how did you decide that this was the direction that you wanted to go in for APT with an in-house training center and an apprenticeship program?
Well, it kind of slipped off the end of my tongue, I guess. And one of the things that we were doing was we were going through a growth period. And in 2012, I was in about 40-some thousand square feet, and we added on to our building in 2013. We actually added on in 2013, 15, and 17. But it was in 2014 that we were looking for our 2015 edition. And we had got together with the mayor and the Defiance County Economic Development and Jerry Hayes in charge of the CIC. And I was a little bit frustrated. So Hicksville, Ohio is in northwest Ohio. We're 20 minutes from Fort Wayne, Indiana, but we're really a farm community. And I had tried working with our local career centers. They didn't have robotic classes in it. They didn't have good machining classes in it. I was trying to work with our community college, and so I was trying to build excitement, and the problem is it wasn't going to happen as quick as what I needed it to happen. And I was kind of under the gun as far as in survival mode with our growth. So sure. I mentioned in a meeting, I said, I'm frustrated. I don't want a second location, but I'm frustrated. I'm thinking about just starting my own high school training program. And when I said that, Jerry Hayes' eyes lit up and the mayor's eyes lit up, and they said, we've been talking about this. We'll support you on it. And so that was the beginning, and when you go home that night and you sit back and think about the day, you're thinking, what did I just do? But anyways, it really worked out fine. But that was the beginning of it. Was in 2014 we started planning it, and in 2015-16 school year, so the fall of 2015, that's really when we started our high school program. And so that was the launch of it. It was just something that slipped off the end of my tongue.
That's great. Now, what resources did you turn to in building up the infrastructure for this kind of workforce development program? There's a lot that goes into this. who or what helped you along the way?
So it really, the way we wanted to lay it out is APT is made up of a full machine shop, full CNC shop, welding and fab, automation. We've got mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and we needed people in all areas. And so what we decided to do is we wanted to lay it out the same way we would build a machine. And when a customer comes to us with an idea or a need, they don't know how to build the machine. All they know is their need. And so, for example, we pack out sweet and sour cups that you dip your chicken in. And the customer never told us how to build the machine. All they did was gave us a sweet and sour cup and said, we need 720 of these a minute. So it's our job to do that. And so what we decided to begin with was we wanted to lay our program out the same way that our company flows. And so we did that by saying the first thing we wanted to do was become teach the kids or the students how to become a visionary engineer. So many times people think an engineer is somebody that draws things on paper or on a computer, and that's true, but really engineering starts in the mind. It doesn't start on paper.
Right.
And so when we did that, we bring the students in, and the first thing we do actually is we teach them our language. So we said, okay, we're going to have students come in here that really don't know what a mic is or a caliper is or a 1, 2, 3 block is. And we don't want them to be embarrassed. That's like your dad asking you to grab the crescent wrench and you don't know what it is. And you go to the toolbox and his toolbox looks huge because you're looking at all these tools and you don't want to be embarrassed. So you grab something. But so the first 3 weeks we teach them what is a tenth. In other words, your math class teaches you what a tenth is, but in the math, well, a tenth of a thousandth is what we refer to. So we teach them what's a tenth, what's a 1, 2, 3 block, what's a gauge, what's a Bridgeport mill, what's a lathe, all of this equipment. And so all of our classes are broken up into 3-week segments. And so every 3 to 4 weeks they switch and do something different. And one of my wife and I's goals to begin with was, we want to grow our company and we want to teach these kids, but we also have a goal that if we taught a young high school student what he didn't like, then we also won because they didn't have to spend the money in college. And so the first thing they do is go through our what we call tools of the trade, and they go through our language. The second thing they do is visionary engineering, and we ask the students, what's a conveyor? And they say, I don't know what a conveyor is. And I say, yeah, you know what a conveyor is. You put your groceries on a conveyor every time, and it moves the product to the lady that's going to check it out. And I said, do you know what a sensor is? Well, no, we don't know what a sensor is. Yeah, because your food that you put on the conveyor stopped when it hit a sensor. And so we talk logically, and we start to build their minds on what it is. And because we're in a farm community, sometimes we'll say, what's a conveyor? And they say, we know what a conveyor is. It conveys the straw and the hay up to the hay mound. And you're exactly right. That's a conveyor as well. So in the automation world, we always think about how is the product coming in, how's the product going out, and what are we doing with it? And those are the 3 key elements to robotics. It really is. And I mean, there's obviously more involved. But so then they engineer things. They start building a machine in their mind, and then we come up with a bill of materials of purchased items. What can we buy, and what do we have to make? And then they actually draw up what they have to make. But in our first year, they're not allowed to use the computer. We feel the computer, to design in a computer is really an aid because we feel still that designing comes from the brain and comes from being visionary. So we teach them how to draw on paper. And if they can sketch it on paper and 3D sketch it on paper, now it's instilled in their head. So they do the engineering, and then they go on the floor and they build their parts. They machine their parts. And then whenever they go on the floor, they're surrounded by usually 5 to 10 mentors in those departments. So our tool makers and machinists just really get excited when the kids come out and they're working with them for 3 weeks, and they're teaching them really artwork. And we often say today we have about 130 employees, and I say I got 130 employees and I got 100 artists because they're just truly artists on what they make. And so they go through machining and they machine their parts, but as they're machining their parts, they're also machining customers' parts because the tool makers say, well, here, help me with my product or help me with my part, and so they make parts. They touch a little bit on the CNC machines. A CNC machine is a computer numerical piece of equipment. It's a computer numerical controller, actually, but it's still a mill or it's still a lathe. And until you understand a basic mill and lathe, there's really no reason to let the computer run it, because we really want to teach them how to manually run it first. And
right.
Then they go into the welding department and they weld their parts together that they're going to make, and they work with our welders for 3 or 4 weeks. And then they go to the automation floor and they assemble their parts. And while they're there, they're assembling parts for our customers as well. And so they're working every afternoon from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. They're on our floor between the work that they do in the classroom and on the floor, but there's a combination there. And so the way we set our program up is the first half of the year is all the mechanical side, and the second half of the year is the electrical side. So on the electrical side, they learn what's 24 volts, what's 110 volts. Well, that's what you plug your phone into, or into the wall, and what's 240 and what's 480 and what's single phase and 3-phase. So we teach them all these things, and just basic electricity. And then they go through panel building, and they learn how to wire a panel, and they learn to understand what is field device wiring, and what does that mean, and what is a camera when you're mounting a camera, and then what is a robot, and they learn to program a robot. And we're a FANUC robot integrator. Out of about, 400 integrators in the United States, we're in the top 20 for FANUC robotics. And so that's kind of neat. We do a lot of robots. So they learn to program robots, they learn to program PLCs, they learn to program HMIs. At the end of the year, they're really not a master of any of it. They're really, what we're trying to do is find out what they're good at and what their skill is. And then in life, we can help nurture that skill. But you had asked what some of the problems that we had, I guess. That was one of your questions, and how does our program flow? One of the issues we had right away is I really didn't want involved with a college, because I was really frustrated with colleges. And I was frustrated because when you go to a college, I'm going to talk in the past, because life has changed in the last 4 to 5 years in manufacturing. It really has. And 5 years ago, you used to go to the college and say, who do you have? Who's graduating? And then what did they do? And they would tell you what they were going to give you, rather than allowing us to tell them what we needed. And I think colleges today have changed, but 5 years ago, it really wasn't. Colleges weren't looking at manufacturing as deep as they are today. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't want nothing to do with colleges, and I wanted to teach high school kids and teach them our way. But one of the things I found out that I couldn't do that would help anybody that wants to start a high school program is, about 4 weeks before our program started, we sat down with the high school principal, and I said, okay, I've got one last question. When those students come to my building, are they covered under your insurance? And he said, well, absolutely not. They're covered under your insurance because they're on your property. And I said, well, they're not covered under my insurance because they're not on my payroll. Right. So that became a little bit of a problem. And that's when we really partnered with Northwest State Community College, because we became an extension of Northwest State. And by becoming an extension, they sign up for class through Northwest State, and we built the class so that they could be at APT and go through all the different levels. And they actually get college credits, but they're a student of Northwest State College, so now they're under the Northwest State Community College insurance. And that's really, if I speak at a lot of places, and that's one of the things that I can't stress enough, that you really need to partner with your state, and you really need to partner with your community college. Those are important.
Yeah.
Correct.
And what a great perspective of approaching this from an engineering standpoint of building this program. We think a lot of times maybe companies who would have interest in sort of building up their own workforce could just operate under the assumption of, well, I'm not educated. That's HR, that's education, that's not what we do. But to take an engineering approach to it is such an interesting idea. I imagine, too, that this is something that really energizes your current workers, the ones who are serving as mentors. What does it mean there?
It sure does. It really throws an energy through our whole company, and I can't help but take pictures when I go out and I see them all on the floor, and I see all my tool makers or my welders or my machinists or my programmers in there. They've got these young students, and they're teaching them what they know, and it's really given back to the student. It's given back to the community, and that's really, to me, a really neat feature of what it is, because it changed the whole vibe of our company. Because it's not Tony Nighswander or the Nighswander family that's doing this. It's really the APT family that's doing this. And one of the things I did when I had that idea of doing this, the first thing I did was sat down with about 10 of our employees, and I said, guys, this is what I'm thinking about. Am I crazy, or do I have your blessing on this? Because without the blessing of the employees, all they're going to do is say, geez, why are these kids in here? They're in my way. I'm not getting my work done. And by getting the blessing of the employees really was kind of neat. And then we announced it to the whole company, and we said, guys, this is what we're doing. I think this is a neat thing. And our whole company just bought into it. They really did. It was it's grown so much as a family, as an APT family, that it's really neat to see those students in all the different areas that they walk through our company in.
What a great perspective of approaching this from an engineering standpoint, of actually engineering and building this training program. And I'd imagine that this is something that really energizes your current workers who are serving as mentors, too.
Yeah, that's true. And, you had mentioned engineering, and I'll share with you, this has been interesting to me because today's students, they go through so much testing in high school, and they have to pass all their state testing and all this, and sometimes they're just burnt out. Sometimes they just want out. And when I first started talking to the schools about being an engineer, I had students just turn around like, that's the last thing I want to do is go to 4 more years of college. I'm done. I started talking to the students about being a gearhead instead of being an engineer. Yeah. And I asked them, I said, how many of you guys, when you were young and your bicycle chain fell off, did you put your bicycle chain back on, or did you lay your bike in your front yard and wait for your dad to do it? How many of you guys have popped the hood of your car and looked at your engine, or worked on your engine, or your mini bikes, or your go-karts, or your four-wheelers? And I had, 20, 30 kids raise their hand. And I said, I want all of you to stay after. I didn't talk to them about being an engineer. What I talked to them about was being a gearhead, and they are a gearhead. And really, we wanted to capture the gearheads. We can make a gearhead into an engineer, but I can't make an engineer into a gearhead. So we kind of did some things a little bit different to talk to them, because some of the students that already knew they wanted to go into engineering, well, then they're going to go to a 4-year degree, and they're going to do that. But I wanted to talk to the students that had so much potential as just good workers and good ethics and farm boys and farm girls that really I wanted to speak to them in a little bit different light. So one of the things we do as well in our apprenticeship program or in our summer intern programs is if a student goes to a 4-year college and graduates as an engineer, they think they're going to come in here and have a desk job, and it's really the opposite. They really come in here, and the first thing they do is go on our floor for at least a year, because without building it, how can you draw something you've never built? Right. So our philosophy is a little bit different here, because you've got to get some hands-on training before you can go into the office. So I've had engineers that I've hired. I got one of my guys on the floor. He's been on the floor for 4 or 5 years. He actually graduated as an engineer, 2-year degree, mechanical engineering, and he came in and he worked in the office for just a month or two, and he come in my office. He said, man, I think I'm going to quit. He said, I just don't like this at all. And I said, well, let's put you on the floor. And I put him on the floor, and he said, I don't ever want to be an engineer again. I just enjoy building robot cells. And so that's what kind of triggered me to say, okay, everybody that comes out of college should have to go on the floor before they go in the office. And so that's what we do today.
Through all this experience, what have you learned about training and developing a local workforce? What changes even have you made to the program along the way?
So every year my wife and I and our family look at what we're doing and we say, okay, this was the best year we ever had. And it wasn't that it was the best students. It's actually because we're becoming more organized and better at what we do. But one of the decisions that we made, so about 2 years ago, we actually we were growing and we were being contacted by recruiters. And one of the things that I despise is paying a recruiter to bring me a employee. And so we decided to hire our own recruiter. And when we did that, we hired somebody that does our recruiting, that's in charge of our high school training program, that's in charge of our apprenticeship program, that's in charge of our robotics training program. And so that was one of the key moves that we made. The problems that we had to begin with was everybody was trying to organize it, but nobody had the time to organize it. So when I made the investment into a person to take care of the training center and to take care of all the apprenticeship program and everything, I think that was a turning point in what we did. And so that's one of the things. But when she's not just in charge of the 10 high school students, we've got nine people in our apprenticeship program that we're paying their college on right now.
Yeah.
And we've got 4 or 5 people that are going through FANUC robot training. And that's a 2-year program that we put together. They go to FANUC Robotics every 8 weeks. They go to FANUC Robotics for a week, and that's on a 2-year program, a rotation. So we invest a lot of money in training.
What are you continuing to look forward to? How do you see these offerings continuing to evolve, and what excites you for the rest of this year and beyond?
So. That's neat. That's a good question, because it's neat to see the students that we're hiring or that we have in our apprenticeship or our high school program and our apprenticeship program be able to stick around, buy a house, get married, stay around the area where prior to this they were actually, thinking about where did they have to move to, where did they have to go to get a job. And yet, being in a farm community, in a small community, it's really means something to the parents and the grandparents and the family for people to be able to stick around here. So I think that's one of the neat things that we've seen, develop and that we want to continue to do. As far as continuing, I don't know that we would drop our program as long as we can keep growing and I need employees. I think I'll always continue the high school program and the apprenticeship program. Somebody asked me once, how much money do you spend on these students? You're paying all your employees to train. And I said, you know what? I look at it a little bit different, because when you hire somebody, you hire them in. It doesn't matter the wage. It can be $10 or $15 or $100. It doesn't matter. But you're paying the new employee, and you're also paying somebody to train them. In our high school program, I'm paying the trainer, and I have 10 prospects that I'm not paying at all. So either way, you're going to pay, but I'm only singly paying instead of doubly paying right now. So I look at that a little bit different of how we do it, because everybody trains. It doesn't matter what company you're in. If you're growing, you're training. I read an insert out of, I think it was a 1 Minute Manager book, and it said, the CFO said to the CEO, what if we train all these people and they leave us? And the CEO said back to the CFO, what if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah, I love that.
So what are we going to do if they stay and we didn't train them? We have to train people. It's our duty to train people. So.
Well, Anthony, thank you so much for your time in joining us today. Congratulations on the success of the program so far, and all the best going forward.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to be a part of your program, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. For Manufacturing Tomorrow's Workforce, I'm Christine LaFave Grace. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.
That was Christine's interview with Anthony Nighswander, president of APT Manufacturing. Tune in again in 2 weeks for our next podcast, and be sure to rate and review and subscribe to Manufacturing Tomorrow's Workforce. You don't miss anything.